What's up, YouTube? We're back with another tier list. This is going to be our tier 10 bots, 4-player co-op weapons tier list. We're going through primary, secondaries, and grenades, also melee weapons. We just witnessed the Illuminate's Meridia Black Hole absorb Angel's Venture. So we're just off with that. We just reacted to it on stream. So for the next one, feel free to drop by the stream. Quick plug. But let's get into it. As we said with the bugs tier list, starting off with the ARs, would love to see them get more backup mags, but with bots, it's a little different. I find light pen to be definitely not as strong. It's harder to make light pen work unless you have a very delicate hand when using it. Liberator can be used to create effect. I'm assuming that you're pretty good at tapping those Devastator eyes. Light pen has received some, better engagements, especially versus rocket striders. The rockets are a lot easier to hit on the side of striders, and the rocket barrager tank basically has no armor on its silo now, so you can just light pen attack it, which is nice. But keep in mind that you may feel that the Liberator is going to be lower on the tier list depending on how accurate you are. If you find that if you don't have as much of an accurate hand, you might want to bring anything that's light pen down a rank, at least one. Okay, Liberator Penetrator. I gotta say, I've been really liking what this weapon has been doing for me on bot missions. I find that I can bring it and be quite, proficient with it. Medium pen, able to take out, those radiators on tanks, able to take out Devastators more effectively, because you don't need as much of a skilled hand when taking them out. Berserkers die faster. Just, it's nicer to have medium pen on bots. It just, in general, it's a really nice, nice buff, honestly. The 35% damage buff and just being able to pen in certain situations is just nice to have. So, yeah. Liberator Concussive, I don't like it as much as I do on bugs. I find that the only real enemy I want to concuss a lot of time is going to be the Berserkers. It can deal with Devastators and stuff like that, but because it has light pen and concuss, you have to hit a body part like a leg or something like that can actually be, concussed away. Not as big of a fan. If maybe it was one-handed like the Pummeler, I'd like it more because Pummeler at least has some synergy with a couple different shield stratagems, but not as much for this one. STA-52, going to be lower than the Liberator. It doesn't have great iron sights, and having the nicer scope on the normal Liberator allows you to get some zoom, so you can hit those shots on Devastators easier. Although you got the bigger magazine, and many probably prefer the STA-52 on Illuminate or bugs, I think there's a pretty big argument that the Liberator just tends to work a little bit better in general. The faster fire rate of the Liberator Carbine doesn't really get used very much on bots. Also, the greater recoil makes it harder for you to hit those eyes. Obviously you can drop the rest of them and maybe drop a Berserker a little faster, but I don't think that really, shines bright enough versus, the Liberator's more accurate fire. Tenderizer, honestly, pretty big fan of it. I tend to keep it on a lower fire rate for the most part. Good scope. You can actually start tap firing with it. And it's going to be one of the only light pen weapons that brings itself up into the A tier, like A-. But, I think it does do fairly well if you have a pretty precise hand. And it does mag dump pretty well on the lower tier enemies. But it is not, it's lacking the medium pen. So it's going to be kind of awkward in some situations versus like a tank or something like that. So keep that in mind. Adjudicator, another one that I think deserves to be in like A+. With a skilled hand, I think you can be very successful with it. Highly recommend giving it a try. If you haven't used it recently, good scope on it as well. Good ammo, decent stagger, good durable damage, good damage in general. I recommend giving it a try. Diligence, normal diligence, like a B+, maybe an A-. If you want that. I find myself preferring to use the Tenderizer in most situations. The automatic fire when you need it is very useful, although the diligence does have a better scope if you're looking for that. But I find that, if you want to go down the diligence route, you might as well just go for the counter sniper, which I'll skip to next. I love the counter sniper. It's fantastic, but I'm assuming that you're pretty damn good at tapping heads. If you're not, you're going to find you're going through ammo quite a bit, right? This is going to be one of those picks that you might be surprised to go in S tier, but it really depends on how accurate you are. If you find you're someone that does not prefer the precision and maybe you're on controller, you may not like it very much, and you might want to put it down to like A minus, right? So keep that in mind. Constitution, probably like a C plus. At least it's medium pen, and if you have really good aim, you know, you could do some crazy stuff. The melee on it can get you out of some weird situations with a tank. You can melee a tank to death because the melee does kind of go through the armor and attack the main HP pool. Really silly, but it does work. So that's basically why it's C tier. So yeah, I'll keep it there. It's kind of meme worthy, but it does have that kind of niche. Plaz 39. This is probably the faction that it shines the brightest on. I'm gonna put it somewhere in like B plus, B minus, like top end of B minus. Some people might be surprised why isn't it lower, but I do find that it does a fairly good job at taking out distant devastators fairly effectively, rocket striders, and dealing with gunships quite well. Obviously it doesn't have a ton of ammo, and you want to be trying to hit, you know, pretty good shots with it. I'm hoping that they give it a little more love, because I do think it should shine brighter, maybe more impact damage, a little more ammo. When I did speak to the devs at Arrowhead, you know, giving them some advice for this weapon in particular, they were like, well, it kind of worked this way in Killzone. We didn't want to alter the weapon too far from what it actually was in the game, which is fair. So I'm hoping at least they give it some tweaking damage-wise, but we'll see. The Knight, I mean, putting it in the one-handed, it is a one-handed weapon. You can put it in a burst fire, which makes it easier to hit those shots. But as far as one-handed weapons go, I feel like I'd rather go for some other ones, especially ones that are easier to tap fire. The burst fire does work, like I said, but I think I'd rather end up going for, like, you know, a defender or a pummeler in most situations. STA 11, honestly, just a kind of worse Knight. Yeah, I almost just want to put it in C tier, because at least the Knight itself has burst fire, and the STA 11 does not have a great iron sight because it's a Killzone weapon, and it doesn't have the fire mode changes, so you just got to be careful with it. You're gonna bullet hose really easily, and you might just like spray an entire mag and not kill a Devastator, for instance. So yeah, keep that in mind. Reprimand, I'm going to be putting it in like A minus. The reason why I'm not putting it any higher than this is that it has quite a bit of bloom. I'm still hoping that they reduce the bloom on it. I understand that, you know, if you reduce the bloom too much, maybe it'll run into a situation where like ARs are competing with it. But this is where I'm just hoping that they take my advice of separate the two classes. SMGs do vastly more damage in close range. ARs do maybe more linear, you know, it can have some drop off, but like a more linear fall off. So like the Reprimand maybe does like double the amount of damage per second of an AR up close, like in the 20 meter mark. But as soon as you get out of the 20 meter mark, it drops off hard. I saw this happen in Space Marines 2. The Bolt Carbine got this treatment, and I love using the Bolt Carbine. It does 50% more damage than an AR, like a normal bolter, in close range. But as soon as you get outside of that like fall off distance, it drops off hard, which I think is a fair balancing point for SMGs, and I'd maybe like to see them maybe pursue that, right? Keep SMGs the same as they are at long distance now, but give them like a nice damage bonus up close to kind of really facilitate that like SMG nature, right? The close quarters nature. But we'll see. What do they do? I think both the Pummeler and the Defender kind of deserve to be somewhere in the B plus range. I used to put the Pummeler a little bit higher in A minus, but they have been like changing. I actually got this information from Thick, and he's quite the Pummeler enjoyer, as you've maybe seen in his videos. The stun on the Pummeler has been going up and down over the course of like a while now. I think the Pummeler needs like a longer stun, similar to Liber Carbine also needs a longer stun to differentiate itself and give it a little more oomph, because it's just, I think it's like a 1.5 second stun, and it would be nice if it went up. I think it used to be like when it first dropped like closer to 3 seconds. I do not think it would be overpowered if it got like closer to like 2 to 3 seconds. I think it would be in a fairly okay spot. Regular Punisher, kind of an odd one. Mostly down to the fact that it has fairly good killing potential, especially on the lower tiers, for just being like aim at the eye of a Devastator and hopefully some of the pellets hit it. You know, it's kind of like an RNG gambling machine, but it has quite a bit of stagger at the same time. So it's kind of like one of those like easy weapons to use. I wouldn't recommend it for most people because I think after like you get out of like level 6, you kind of want to move towards something else. But like it's a solid weapon, and for someone who doesn't like aiming, it might be even closer to B+. I'm gonna put it in B- for now just because it lacks that longer range that you're gonna be craving when you're fighting bots, but it's okay. Slugger, it's an awkward one. Part of me wants to put it lower just so like, oh, the devs will notice and like, please buff it. You know, I talked to the devs and I was like, take away the cone, right? It should be more accurate, give it more damage, and it would be in a great spot, right? If it did like 50% more damage, because I think it deserves it, because it's quite a bit slower fire rate than the Dominator, which just, pun intended, dominates it. And on top of that, it's got the accuracy debuff, right? So randomly, it will just miss a shot when you're like 30 meters away from a target, which sucks. So hopefully they can address that in the future. Yeah. Halt is an interesting one. I like it. EMP rounds are nice. The flechette rounds are nice. Obviously, it doesn't have great range, so that's why it's not any higher, but you can definitely make it work on bots. You're going to have to play a little more aggressive, but obviously you already know that. It's a shotgun. It's a flechette shotgun. But I think the EMS rounds really allow you to like get up and close to those enemies and not feel like you're going to get, you know, mowed down extremely fast. So yeah, not bad. Cookout, I'm going to put it somewhere next to the Punisher. I think the Cookout might be a little bit better than the Punisher just because you have the potential of like AoE fire damage. You know, it's not, the fire damage is not particularly great because the HP pools on bots on average are a lot higher. But let's say there's like a mission where there's jet troopers, the jet brigade, you know, incredibly good on. If you're a person that just likes firing into the distance, you know, maybe it's like a B, you know, B+ somewhere in that range. You know, you can get away with just like lighting everything on fire, kind of a team support weapon, where you're just like weakening everything essentially because of the fire, which is pretty decent. I'll give it that. The breaker shotgun, I'm gonna say like low B, like C. I can't recommend it. Yeah, it's got damage per second, you know, potential because you could just like mag dump a berserker in front of you, or maybe a potential devastator. But you're going through ammo so fast on this thing, doesn't have that much range. Yeah, not gonna really recommend. Like I said with the bug one, I think the breaker spray and pray, because it has so many pellets that you can fire, it's better than the breaker in a lot of situations now. You just have so much ammo for it, and the handling's a lot better, but it's a shotgun on a bot mission. You're going to want more range. But if you get the right variant, like I said, like for the reused ones, get a lot of berserkers running at you, it can work. You know, maybe I'm being a bit too kind to it. Maybe it deserves to be with C as well, but, you know, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Incendiary breaker, similar to the cookout. I think it's somewhere around the breaker spray and pray. At least you have the fire, so you kind of have more guaranteed damage even if one pellet hits, which is nice, but it doesn't have much ammo, so keep that in mind. Don't spray it too much. You know, take tap fire, you know, trying to light enemies on fire. As soon as you see them on fire, wait, you know, unless they're very close to you, then you mag them, right? Crossbow, no surprise. Easily, I would argue, like the best weapon on bots. It's just so versatile, crazy amount of utility, fairly easy to use. 2 taps devastators very easily. Can kill multiple devastators in those 2 taps. Yeah, it's just fantastic. Yeah, what more is there to say? Eruptor, I want to put it an A+, but I'm gonna keep it an A-. It's mostly this high because some of you are like, it's shit compared to the crossbow. The reason why it's there, at least, is it has tons of utility, right? I also spoke to the devs about, hey, can we get it to have better handling, maybe a longer range so it doesn't air burst at 125 meters, and can it have some more ammo / faster cycling time so you don't have to do like the exploit? We'll see what they do, but it's been said to them directly. Yeah, I think the Eruptor is just getting outclassed too hard by the crossbow. Most situations, I just want to use the crossbow. The Eruptor does have a better scope, so if you're someone who's like sniping fabricators, it's nice, but we're limited to 125 meters. It literally airbursts at that range. And the flak doesn't quite do enough damage to make up for the lower explosive damage. So it is what it is. Punisher Plasma, decent. It used to be a lot higher, but I feel like it's just being power crept too much by other weapons around it. I'm going to put it somewhere in B+. You know, I thought about putting it in B-, but I think I would like to see it just doing more damage in general. It feels like it's just dancing. It's making enemies dance too much and not really killing them. Especially like when you deal with some like, you know, rocket striders, you're just causing them to knock back and forth 6 times and you're not really killing them. It is medium pen. It is an explosive, which is nice, but yeah, I won't always recommend it. It has okay range if you start to learn the lobbing, but that's another negative to it, is that the range does matter on bot missions more than most. So yeah, I don't know. B+, it's like nearly there to A- for me. I think it's just slightly out of that band. I think if they gave it like 50 to 100 more explosive damage, immediately up to A-, even almost A+, possibly. So yeah, Blitzer, D tier. I mean, I don't think there's any surprise. Yeah, you could maybe make it work on a Berserker modifier, but you know, you're not going to get that close to a Devastator, a Rocket Devastator, you know, a Heavy Devastator or anything like that. Hi, Luna. Good morning. You want to come up? Luna's come to say hi. Luna, take a seat. Take a seat, princess. Yes, hi, cutie. Yep. All right. You good? Yeah, you're good. Okay. All right. DE Sickle. First, I'm going to do it without the armor. Okay. Without going for, you know, like a build where you're like taking vitality and fire booster and stuff like that. We're going to go immediately to C tier. Okay. Because more than half the meg that you're going to fire before it gets to like the 50% charge is light. Okay. It's light pen. Okay. And luckily, it has no, you know, it doesn't have any real like recoil and stuff like that. So you can do some sniping with it. So maybe it's like B-, but oh man, it's doing so much damage to you. You're not really going to benefit from the medium. And honestly, I would probably just recommend using the regular sickle for the most part when you're not bringing the armor. It just does so much self damage that, you know, you're going to miss those stims, right? Having those extra stims. Because like most of the time I'm dying on a bot mission, it's because I've run out of stims because of chip damage. And you just adding more chip damage to the equation sucks. All right. So you're going to like be letting off the trigger quite a bit when you're using this thing. And, you know, I just probably recommend using the sickle. But that being said, if you bring fire armor and you bring like a Salai backpack or something along those lines, like I'm assuming like you are going to do all the stuff to build around it. This thing's literally like a support weapon. Sorry, Luna's biting my microphone on the other side. So yeah, I think with the fire armor and such, this thing actually comes into a league of its own. It feels like a support weapon at times, especially if you start building really around it. Now, obviously it's a little unfair that I do that for this weapon and not building around it for like other weapons, but I think it does need to be classified for this weapon. It's very unique in that regard. Okay, Scythe. This should be higher, but they still have not fixed the sights. If you increase the zoom on the Scythe, it starts doing this to you, and you're just going to be firing super far away. Sorry, that was my Discord ping. So yeah, the Scythe needs to have that fixed for it to be any higher, but like I'm gonna put it like B+. I think once the sights are fixed, I'm easily gonna put it in A- at least, because it does feel very good to just like, you know, aim at a Devastator's eye and melt it extremely fast because it has like no recoil, good sight now. Like, yeah, they need to fix the zoom factor on it. It looks really weird. Try it in game. It's odd. They still haven't fixed it. So anyways, that being said, sickle, gonna put it right next to the tenderizer. Like using it, although it's light pen, it's fairly easy to use, got a good sight, and unlimited ammo. So that's another reason that it's up there. You know, you're not really going to be worrying about it too much as far as your overall ammo supply. So it's a fairly good choice. But remember, any light pen weapon, you know, bring it down if you feel like your aim is, you know, a little bit off and you're having trouble. Okay. Scorcher, I'm probably going to put it still in like the A+ tier. It's not any higher. just because it does suffer from like an ammo supply issue. You do go through that ammo quite fast, but if you get a flank on a tank or anything like that, it's doing a ton of damage because of the explosive damage and impact damage just coming together. It feels good. Good at dealing with the gunships. Rather good at killing like the rockets off of a rocket strider. It has its moments where it is actually quite strong. Just be careful with the ammo supply on it. That is its number one downside, is that ammo will go quite fast when using it. Careful. Purifier, pretty obvious, all the way up into S tier. This thing is a monster. AoE damage, impact damage, ammo supply. Like this thing, I almost never run out of ammo on a bot mission with this thing. It's disgusting. The only reason it's not a little bit better than the crossbow is that it lacks utility. But when it lacks in utility, it becomes actually a better like killing weapon because you're just reloading far less often and you have a pretty damn good fire rate on it. But keep in mind, if you're someone who just doesn't like charge weapons in games, probably avoid the purifier. But if an enemy is getting real close to you, you can always tap fire it, which is nice as well. So you're not feeling super punished like with the exploding crossbow. If an enemy gets too close to you, it can sometimes be a little awkward to get that distance before firing. So torture is a weird one. I unironically I'm gonna put it like B-. And the only reason for that, and like I almost want to put it a little higher, is that it can do some nasty damage if you can get really close to enemies, especially like tanks and stuff like that, because it has AP4. So you can do some like cool things with it, but it's a flamethrower on a bot mission. You don't quite have the range. It doesn't stagger yet. I still want flamethrowers to have some amount of like pushback or stagger to them. Because like, hey, the flames in your face. I mean, there should be some amount of like, effect. But anyways, torch is like B-. I almost want to put in B+, but like, and I think if you're the right player that is just kind of like, kind of crazy, I think it maybe could be a little bit higher. But I think for most people, it's probably B-. Dominator, I'm still putting it at S tier. Although I see a lot less people use it nowadays. I think that's just because it's not as popular as it once was. It's not as necessary, but it's still fantastic. Great overall weapon. Tons of stagger. Good ammo supply. You can do a lot of sniping with it. Great versus Devastators. It's just a good overall weapon, and it has like great like damage per second on it. It's just like what the Slugger wants to be, and this is why I keep saying the Slugger needs like a 50% damage buff and greater accuracy, because it's competing with the Dominator. It's competing way too heavily with the Dominator, and you're just going to bring the Dominator instead. It just is the better option. So yeah, still think the Dominator is fantastic. I would bring it over a lot of the other ARs just because it has so much oomph and so much stagger on it. So an enemy not shooting at you makes it easier for you to kill them. All right, Peacemaker, it's going to be like maybe C tier. It is nice to be like kind of the stealth pistol, but I think you're better off bringing a lot of other weapons when pairing it with the, primary or something like that. Redeemer is kind of in the same boat. Like, I do think it's a little bit better than the Peacemaker because you can just put it in semi-automatic mode and just tap firing it. It'll more or less feel very similar to the Peacemaker. So yeah, Verdict all the way up to like A- or so. It might be able to, peak into A+ depending on how good of a shot you are. If you're a very good shot, it can actually drop Devastators very fast. But you're not always going to be at that distance. But I do like bringing it for like that medium pen close range. You never know when you're going to need it. And there's just like a rocket Devastator right in front of you, and you don't have time to go for that rocket shot, or a Devastator's right in front of you, and you don't want to have to be super precise. You can just mag dump into the leg of a Devastator, dropping it pretty fast. So there's that. Senator, no surprise that the Senator is all the way in S tier. It's absolutely insane versus bots. Being able to kill Hulks incredibly fast in the eye, 3 shots to the eye. It drops Devastators rather fast, drops Rocket Striders 2 shots in the crotch. Like, it's fantastic. Like, it has a downside of like, reloading pretty slow, but as long as you empty the clip, before, or the cylinder before, going for a reload, it has that speed loader, which is really nice. So yeah. Melee, no surprise, is going to be pretty low, but like I said, with the Constitution, you can do some meme-worthy stuff with it, in the sense that, like, hey, you can walk up to a tank and melee it to death pretty effectively, sort of. You know, if you really don't want to bring any of the other better sidearms, it's got that, you know? So just keep in mind that, like, hey, if you want to make melee work, absolutely go for it. But from an effectiveness standpoint, it's not super effective. It's got its niche, but I can't really recommend it too much more than that. Stim pistol, I'm going to be putting an A- tier, especially with the DE sickle being around, and I'm seeing a lot more people use the stim pistol. I feel like it has more of a usage on bots as well. People tend to take more chip damage on average because of bots, and they're sitting still more often, so it's easier to get those stim pistol shots. I'm still hoping that they reduce the sway of the stim pistol when you're using it, but I think it's actually quite effective on bots. Bushwhacker, kind of an awkward one. I'm probably going to put it like B+. I think it's nice for those moments, those panicked moments where something has just jumped on top of you, or Berserker's right next to you. You need to like stagger him, or Devastator's incredibly close. It's great for that, but like it's a shotgun. You're not really going to be using it at longer ranges, but because it's in the sidearm, I'm usually using my sidearm in close quarters, so it's got that going for it. So I think it's a fairly good choice for bots, and it can be like rather fun and useful for the stagger. Crisper, this one's going to be maybe a contentious one. I'm going to be putting it in B+. And you might be like, why? It's a fucking flamethrower. Well, the reason why is that like it actually has a little bit of a use case where you like, you know, are using a light pen weapon and you get up behind a tank and you can't destroy the radiator of it. This thing melts tanks because it has AP4 and like actually good damage per second. This thing can actually take on a tank rather effectively by itself if you flank it. So if you're not looking to bring anything else and you have like a light pen weapon that can't deal with a tank, this thing's actually pretty good. Other than that, you could be using it as kind of like your trap card. You throw down some fire as you're running away. The bots will run into it. They'll take fire damage, which is pretty useful. And yeah, that's about it. I think it's B+. Maybe it's a bit of a spicy pick, but I think it's kind of fair. The Ultimatum. This is post-patch Ultimatum. I forgot to say that for the DE sickle, but this is post-patch. This is without the reinforcement booster, Hellpod optimization, and this is without the armor that also gives it the extra shot potential. I still think it's S tier. I was thinking about maybe putting in A+, but I think because it does something that no other weapon can do, aka be able to kill a factory strider ridiculously fast, be able to destroy a jammer without needing a stratagem, that's insane. Or be able to take out a detector tower without needing to use a stratagem. It is a stratagem in your secondary slot. If you don't feel like you need the Senator, which you don't always depending on your build, you know, depending on what support weapon you brought, you don't need the Senator. If you are like just wanting an extra stratagem, this thing is insane, right? And it still is even after these nerfs. It's insane, right? It has so much utility. It's great. And if you start doing like the tech where you like have your primary weapon swapped to your secondary, and as it's pulling out, you're like spamming the left, like your trigger button, like you're spamming your fire button, it'll launch twice as far. So it's like even like it's just so good. It's so good. With enough practice, you're going to be sniping objectives, and it's nuts. It's really good. Grenade pistol, A+ or so. You know, the utility of it isn't as necessary because you're not dealing with many fabricators. So I feel as in general, you know, you don't need the grenade pistol as much, but I'm still going to put it up there because it's fairly good for like clumps of enemies and just having like the ability to like bring some other kind of grenade, like a stun grenade, and then you can just have the grenade pistol. So still really high in the utility front, but you know, I think the Ultimatum really does shine above it as far as like even more utility. It's crazy. It's so crazy. Dagger, it's an okay choice. As far as like the light pen sidearms go, I think it's the better one just because it's a laser. You can be really accurate with it. Unlimited ammo, fairly good. Loyalist, gonna go right up next to it. I thought about putting this one a little higher, but Loyalist still has that problem of I just don't think of a sidearm as something I preemptively take out to fire at things. Like, if you're taking the Loyalist as a weapon of, oh, I ran out of ammo in my primary weapon, let me just use my Purifier, but like slightly worse. Okay, that's fair. But usually when I'm bringing my sidearm, I want it for my close quarters. And the fact that you need to charge it to get the vast majority of the damage out of it just doesn't feel good in close quarters. Like in the right context, I think it's quite strong and maybe it deserves to be higher if you're using it right. But I think for most players, they're probably going to be using it similar to me, where it's like it's kind of a panicked weapon rather than a second primary. Because you should kind of think of the loyalists like that, where it's like basically a second primary weapon, because it is very strong. But you yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. Like, if you're using it in the right context, I think it maybe deserves to be A- or A+. But I think most people will probably use it in the context that I use it in, and it's kind of like your close range weapon, and Loyalist just doesn't do that very well. Okay, frag grenades. Standard frag grenades are kind of nice, just to have 5 of them. Just spam it like hordes of like drop ships, that are coming down. You have a frag grenade, you can have a frag grenade, you can have a frag grenade for every individual bot drop, as they're coming down. Fairly good, but the damage is kind of lacking on it. But at least you get 5 of them. High explosive, I will say, is probably the better of the two than frag, just because you get that extra damage, which will secure way more one-shots, which is very nice. Incendiary grenade, can't necessarily recommend in most situations. The fire doesn't last long enough still, and the explosive damage is pretty lacking. So unless your enemies are just kind of standing in the fire, I don't really recommend it. I want incendiary grenades to have fire that lasts longer still. Impact grenade, I'm going to be putting in a solid A. I just like the immediacy of it. Same kind of thing as before, but it has the higher pen and good damage. It's just really strong still. Like, it's never a bad option. Just be careful when you're throwing it at fabricators. Try to learn that angle before you start spamming it, and don't throw it too close to you when you have a berserker running at you, right? Incendiary impact, very similar to the incendiary itself. Just be careful when you're throwing it. Don't throw it too high above the ground, or else the flames will not be on the ground. But I think it's a little bit more usable than the standard incendiary, just because it's an impact. You don't have to worry about this, the fuse. Stuns, still an A+. I think it's come down a little bit just because I feel like I'm not using them nearly as much because the gas grenade exists. And I think the gas grenade still is just a better stun in most situations. If you feel like you just are having trouble with gas making it work and you just need enemies to sit still more, that's where the stun may be your S tier, right? But I find myself bringing the gas in like literally every situation now. Being able to destroy fabricators, great AoE, longer CC because it lasts longer, because like the gas cloud lasts and then it persists a little bit longer after that. It's great. I highly recommend the gas grenade. It has saved my ass so often versus so many Devastators, Berserkers, Hulks. It's just so good. It can be annoying sometimes if like, you get a Hulk to get infected by the gas and then like they start turning away from you. But hey, at least they're CC'd. And if they turn enough, you could just shoot them in the radiator in the back, which is a free kill. Okay. Seeker, I think it's like a B+. It's got some tech, where you can kind of like throw it like kind of like above you kind of thing and get it to like go up and around, if that makes sense, of a Hulk, which is kind of interesting. And like, the Seeker grenades are like rather good for like, it's like almost like a point defense drone where like if anything gets too close to you, it goes and deals with it. And it can be like rather good for like accurate range, right? Because it has range up to like 50 meters. So you can like ping a Devastator or like a Devastator horde that's walking towards you and be like, I need those guys to die. And it will fly over there and deal with them, which is like fairly nice. And if a lot of people are tending to bring supply backpacks on bots. So like every time you hit the supply backpack button, you have 2 more nades to throw out. Hit the supply backpack, 2 more nades. And they just loiter around you. And then when you need them, you can send them to do something. Or if they like are kind of like swarming in, it's fairly good. Honestly, it maybe even deserves to be A-, like, because if you use it with the right like strategy, like if you're like going to POIs, picking up the grenades and like throwing them out, letting them loiter around you, it can actually be pretty damn effective. And honestly, I think, I think I'm giving it enough of a case that it's A-. It can be pretty useful in that regard. And there's not that many small enemies to absorb those Seeker nades from you. So yeah. with the tech for like taking out Hawks from behind and, you know, being able to like take out Devastator swarms at a distance and, you know, just point defense in general. It's kind of nice. I like to have it. Smoke, C. More smoke. I literally said that multiple times to the devs. I'm like, more. Make it bigger. Give you more. Because like a lot of the times you just don't have enough. And it like this is such a small smoke cloud that like it just doesn't feel like enough. You know, bigger cloud, more of them, and I think smoke grenades might actually start climbing the tier list, but it's just not enough yet. No surprise, thermites all the way up in S. Fantastic for dealing with like fabricators from the side, dealing with factory shredders, dealing with hulks. You know, some objectives. Like it's just a nice to have nade. If you didn't really bring any AT, you know, tanks included. If you didn't bring any AT into your loadout and you don't really want to bring like any of these other grenades, which is kind of fair, there you go. You got thermite. Thermites work really well. Highly recommend. And we have throwing knife. Not too much of a hard one for me to place there. Throwing knives are just difficult to use. They don't quite do enough damage. The crosshair is off because it's a third-person game. You know, your crosshair is drawn via the camera in third person, but your character is actually physically throwing it off to the left, so you have to compensate for that. It's just a bit awkward. It's not very good. Maybe if they fix the crosshair and maybe give it like more pen. Like we've like said like, oh, I wonder if they like fix the crosshair and give it like a ton of pen. You could like start killing hulks with like a skill shot, or I don't know, like just give it like 4 pen or 5 pen so you can start like killing a tank almost with it. I think that'd be kind of silly, but maybe that's too silly. I don't know. Anyways, let's go through tier list chat. What do you guys think? What do you guys think, chat? How did I do? Baton is B-. You really think so? Because I feel like I'd rather use a stun lance. It's easier to get a kill. Because the stun lance does more than double the amount of damage, so the faster attack rate of the baton doesn't actually get used. So the better reach of the stun lance would be better. If I'm going to put a melee weapon higher, it'd probably be stun lance. Scorcher's S. It doesn't have enough ammo. You go through so much ammo just dealing with like regular devastators. Like Scorcher versus Purifier. Purifier beats it bar none. Like it's so much better. Sweater D tier. Why no love for the Blitzer? Because it's bots. This is a bots tier list. Why Sickle over Scythe? I think they're pretty much interchangeable. Because the Scythe has bugged sights right now. But if the Scythe had better sights, like it was actually fixed, I would prefer the Scythe over the Sickle. Baton lands for stunning hogs and just like doing whatever you want to do. Yeah, but I mean, it's really unlikely for you to like get out of that exchange like working well. Like I don't know, man. Maybe I'm undervaluing. Like, getting the stun baton to work versus a Hawk is really rough. That fucker's gonna melee you before you get it. Compared to the Dominator holds up, the Dominator has way more stagger versus the Scorcher and a better ammo economy. So that's why it's an S. Hi, Adrian. Gung hei fetch hoi. But handles like shit. The handling doesn't matter on bot missions. Because for the most part, you're more in a stationary position and just like repositioning aim. Handling doesn't have nearly as much of an effect. Like when you have like getting swarmed by bugs, handling matters way more versus bots. Everything's so much slower. But, okay. All right. Well, I've talked to chat, and I will agree that I'm being a little bit hard on melee weapons in general and how they can do some kind of interesting things versus Hulks. But it is very much like a last-ditch resort. I would prefer the stun lance because of the better reach. But it is like last ditch resort kind of situation. It can take Hulks out, but careful. They have really good melee range versus you. So if you don't get that first melee off, it's pretty rough. So like what you can do is you can actually like dive into them and hopefully get the melee off like mid dive, and that can work. But yeah, careful with it. I will concede on that one. Other than that, I think I am pretty happy. Just remember Scythe, if it had the fixed scope, like the better scope, it would be like right up next to Sickle, if not a little higher. And yeah, pretty happy with that. Let me know what you guys think of the tier list down below. This is my take on it. You know, let me know where would you move things depending on your playstyle, right? Because playstyle often plays a big factor in how these, you know, shake out, and often what stratagems and stuff like that you use. I'm trying to do this tier list more or less from a neutral standpoint of like, you know, you can bring this with any weapon or anything, and this is how you would use it, or this is how it would shake out. But, you know, obviously, like if you bring, you know, this weapon with this stratagem, this weapon definitely gets a lot better, you know, things of that nature, right? Like, for instance, Scorcher. You know, Scorcher might be easily an S tier for you because the ammo economy problem gets completely resolved because you have a spyback factor, right? So keep that in mind, right? I'm trying to build these tier lists from a standpoint of like stratagems are like taken out, and you're more or less just like, these are the weapons, and then you can make them better or worse depending on what you bring next to them, right? Cool. All right. That's it for this tier list. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Also, remember in the previous video I said in our Discord we have a balance changes like kind of forum that you guys can like fill out. I've been having quite a few discussions with Des even now that I'm back from Stockholm, and I just want to hear what you guys think. We're mostly talking about stratagems at the moment, but feel free to talk about weapons and what you'd like to see changed with weapons as well. I'm just kind of parsing through everything and just, you know, trying to build, you know, some advice for the devs. So, you know, let yourself be heard. Check out the Discord. Also, consider dropping a like on the video if you enjoyed it. We're going to be doing more tier lists into the future. We have quite a few more to go, including stratagems. So yeah, thank you for watching. Have a great morning, evening, afternoon, night. Bye, dude. Peace.